Coming up on Bridge City News, Alberta Health Services says a technical glitch prevented 5,000 Albertans from receiving their COVID-19 test results. We hear from those in the Alberta agriculture sector who explain why agriculture is one of the main backbones of our economy. And U.S. President Trump, along with First Lady Melania, confirmed that they have both come down with COVID-19.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Our province's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dina Hinshaw, says Alberta will not be cancelling Halloween over COVID-19 concerns. The province released a series of guidelines on its website on how trick-or-treaters and candy handlers can enjoy the night safely. Hinshaw says since the event takes place outside, kids are actually safer. If the weather is warm, Hinshaw says people may want to hand candy outside rather than at their front door. Hinshaw's announcement came as Alberta listed another 173 new coronavirus cases in the province. They include a new outbreak at the Foothills Hospital in Calgary, where 64 patients and staff have tested positive for the coronavirus. 5 people have also died from COVID-19 at the Foothills Hospital. The province came out with its updated COVID-19 numbers today. Alberta had an increase of 122 cases. There are now 1,558 active cases, including just 31 here in the South Zone. Officials say more than 16,500 Albertans have recovered from COVID-19. Across the province, 64 people are in hospital with the virus. There have also been 272 deaths attributed to the novel coronavirus here in Alberta. Across Canada, there have been 9,406 COVID-19 related deaths, and there are still around 24,000 active cases. Alberta Health Services says a technical glitch prevented 5,000 people who tested negative for COVID-19 from getting their test results by phone, autodialer, or text. AHS says that represents less than 3% of the tests conducted in September. Officials say anyone with a positive result from September 3rd through the 29th was contacted by telephone. They say the problem has been fixed and delayed results are now being delivered. The COVID-19 pandemic has not only impacted our physical health, but our mental well-being as well. That's according to Dr. Gregory Jantz, who's the founder of the Center at Place of Hope. Dr. Jantz says the coronavirus has created a lot of depression, anxiety, and fear.
The fear of going out has increased. As we've quarantined, as we've confined, as we've isolated, we've also created a fear of going out. I mean, think about the social anxiety right now. People don't know, do I look at you? When do I wear my mask? And everything is socially awkward. I was just with a gentleman today, and he reached over and gave me a big hug. By the way, it was fine with me, but it's like he goes, "Oh no, I shouldn't have done that. I'm so sorry." People don't know what to do, what's okay. That's social anxiety.
Dr. Jantz will have more on anxiety and how you can overcome it. That's coming up in the second half of our show. 2 Alberta physicians are explaining why a contract fight between the doctors and province has them leaving Alberta. Dr. Amy Tan, a Calgary physician for 16 years, says her plans to stay have changed this spring when the dispute began. Tan says she is moving to Victoria, BC. Another family physician, Dr. Kian Hackett in Central Alberta, says he's moving to Ontario because it's tough to do any long-term planning without a contract. He says the province does not match his values in public health care. 1 person died and 2 others were injured following a rollover on Highway 3 east of the Old Man River Bridge yesterday afternoon. Coaldale RCMP say a 2015 BMW X1 was being driven westbound when it lost control and rolled several times. A 20-year-old female passenger was ejected and died at the scene. The driver and the other passenger were transported to Chinook Hospital for minor injuries. Police say the family of the deceased woman are not from the Lethbridge or Coaldale area. The name of the woman will not be released. A group called the Citizens for a Better Coaldale is making an appeal to the town. Concerns arise after an apparent lack of transparency on big projects the town is undertaking, including the Civic Square project, a recreation center, and a new school. The group is now calling for a municipal inspection to be done on the town. The Citizens for a Better Coaldale met at a town council meeting this week, and they're hoping to start a petition where they would need 20% of community support to force a municipal inspection.
As far as public participation on the site location for the rec center and the school, there was none. The town made the decision for us without even involving the citizens of Coaldale. The Civic Square project that's behind me, that's going to be supposedly happening in 2021. It's the largest project in the history of Coaldale for its main street.
I have no issue with the municipal inspection itself, but at our last council meeting when Jack Van Ryan presented, the biggest thing to me that kind of made me step back on it is that he said the school would be paused. So we have a proposed school and we're hoping to get funding soon for it. We're Palliser Regional School's #1 choice for projects that they need to get done. So putting a pause on this project could actually cause us to lose that first place, maybe even the second place and the third. So I would rather them come with concrete reasons for the inspection and us hire people out to help us, figure those out.
Municipal inspections have taken place in other southern Alberta towns, including Granham, Longview, and Fort Macleod. The new Lethbridge Police Chief says he will not be supporting Lethbridge West MLA Shannon Phillips' appeal, nor her request for a public hearing into discipline handed to 2 officers who admitted to unauthorized surveillance on her in 2017. Chief Shaheen Medizadeh says the hearing was done and sanctions were given to the officers, so that's where it will end. He did acknowledge that Phillips had the right to take her appeal to the Alberta Law Enforcement Review Board and to put the decision in their hands. In a hearing last July, officers Jason Carrier and Keon Warnock admitted to using their positions to try and overhear a private conversation between Phillips and local conservation stakeholders. The officers thought Phillips was discussing potential changes within the castle area where off-road vehicles would have been restricted under the previous NDP government. Both officers are off-road enthusiasts. Many people talk about the oil and gas sector being the backbone of Alberta's economy. However, Alberta's agriculture sector has been thriving for many Albertans, even during the pandemic. As Ainsley O'Reilly explains, the Alberta government is predicting a record-breaking year in an industry that means so much to Albertans.
Stats Canada says 11.5% of Albertans are unemployed. However, the agriculture industry has been a bright spot. This year's crop is up 11% from last year, with projections of record-breaking harvests across the province.
The incredible advances of ag technology, productivity, crop science, irrigation, sophisticated equipment, more effective fertilizers, more effective farming techniques, zero-tillage farming, all of the exciting things that are happening with higher and higher yields.
Jason Kenney's government is anticipating an increase of farming exports to $16.3 billion by 2023, a 43% increase.
The ag industry has to keep moving forward. People have to eat. People need food on their table. There was huge spikes in meat demand and wheat demand, canola oil demand, in different spots.
The plan, 4 new hires to surge into the international market, including Mexico City and Singapore, while working to expand to the United States and Europe.
Work on promotion of Alberta ag products so that people in those areas will know what it is and will be wanting to buy it. They're also going to try to do investment attraction from those foreign markets into Alberta.
The fact that they understand that we need to move our product to market, and the market is not always right here.
The UCP government says they will roll out a new announcement next week. For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
Parents and caregivers across southern Alberta have struggled to make the decision of having their child attend school in person, online, or homeschooled due to the pandemic. Now, one of the highlights of students going back is school photos. The Galt Museum will be providing that opportunity through a special fundraiser they're hosting. Loris Alexander has the details.
Today we are doing our back to school photo fundraiser that we've planned right here at the Galt Museum. We've invited families that have children to come and book a spot so that they can get school photos taken of their kids, because we know that that's a big milestone every year for families. They display them on their walls, they keep them. It's this great marker of how time is passing, and we really wanted to be able to provide something that would help increase the feel of normality this year.
Rattan says there were approximately 48 spots open and they were fully booked.
One of the things that we are excited about is we've asked the parents for permission to archive the photos so that we have a historical record of how COVID has impacted families as well as the public school system and the education opportunities that students are enjoying for those who are doing virtual school, homeschooling, or who are continuing to be at school, but in a different way.
There was no cost to the photos. The Galt asked for donations instead.
With the Friends of the Galt Endowment Fund, it was set up a couple of years ago in order to create that safe hold for future generations for the Galt Museum. We love what we do now, but we want to make sure that there's still a museum here and the programs, the top-notch programs and events and everything that happen here for future generations. And so putting it into the endowment fund, which we have been doing throughout the last few years, helps that initiative and helps us be able to prepare well for the future.
Rodler says future photo shoots might be in the works for the Galt, but that also depends on the success of the current photo shoot.
Depending on how things turn out from this one, we could look at doing additional photo shoots for these kids. Anybody that's been coming in here right now has been saying this has been a wonderful idea. It makes us feel included for getting those headshots and getting those school shots that everybody so treasures for Christmas presents and whatnot. So they're all walking out with smiles on their faces with that.
For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
Canada West says it is delaying a decision on allowing athletes to commence play in January until November the 2nd. The original deadline for a decision was October the 8th. Following feedback from student athletes, the board of directors said they needed more time to assess the feasibility of conference play returning next year, given the evolving COVID-19 environment. Today's announcement pertains to second-term team sports, including basketball, hockey, volleyball, wrestling, and curling. Many refugees have stories to share, and that's what the Galt Museum and Archives hopes to capture as they unveil their new exhibit called Refuge Canada. As Micah Quinn explains now, this exhibit draws from personal experiences and unique stories from refugees.
When you make your way inside of the Refuge Canada exhibit, you'll see stories and artifacts come to life.
And it explores Canada's role in the refugee crisis and the historical role that Canada has played. So it really gives visitors a chance to experience the life of a refugee and what that experience looks like. But it also raises questions about Canada's response to the refugee crisis, which Canada actually has quite a mixed record in that respect.
Benoit says this is an important exhibit for the community to see.
It provides a bigger context for the story of refugees, the experience of refugees through history. And, within our own community, of course, we have many refugee communities, but this sets it into a bigger context that allows us to understand how the Canadian policy kind of influences what we experience here at home.
The exhibit features refugee experiences from first-person voices.
So the Canadian Museum of Immigration conducts a lot of oral histories, and they've incorporated those stories into this exhibit. So visitors can actually hear people telling their own stories. There's artifacts that people used that connect to very powerful experiences that they've had as refugees. And that's one of the wonderful things about this exhibit is that it allows people to really connect to this story and to people's experiences in a really personal way.
The Refuge Canada exhibit will run at the Galt Museum and Archives until January of 2021. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Economic Development Minister Melanie Joly says Ottawa is adding $600 million to a fund to help small and medium businesses weather the COVID-19 storm. The Relief and Recovery Fund is intended to help enterprises that might not be eligible for other pandemic-related assistance.
Over the past months, it has helped 12,000 businesses, and it has protected nearly 95,000 jobs all across the country. We also help many tourism businesses from hotels, restaurants, and travel agencies as they're going through a really difficult time.
The Trudeau government announced that the Canada Infrastructure Bank will invest $10 billion in projects expected to create around 60,000 jobs. Among priority areas are agricultural infrastructure in Western Canada and broadband to expand access to high-speed internet service across the country. Board Chair Michael Sabia says this is a solid investment.
When more high-impact projects emerge, we are ready to invest more. Beyond this plan and its immediate priorities, the bank will continue developing ideas and working with partners across government and the private sector. The bank is ambitious. We want to build our presence in a range of areas, from large-scale urban transit to water systems to the new kinds of infrastructure that Canada needs to prosper in a digital age. The Infrastructure Bank is open for business and committed to investing to expand the potential of our economy to grow, potential to create jobs, to create opportunities for Canadians.
U.S. President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania both confirmed that they have tested positive for COVID-19.
The president said on Twitter early Friday that he and the First Lady will begin their quarantine process immediately and that they will get through this together. Trump's positive test comes just hours after the White House announced that senior aide Hope Hicks had come down with the virus after traveling with the president several times this week. Trump was last seen by reporters returning to the White House on Thursday evening and looked to be in good health.
Mr. President, why don't you help negotiate? Mr. President, relief?
The positive test comes a month before the election and after the president has spent the year largely downplaying the threat of the virus. Krista Fourier, Associated Press.
And we hope that they'll both recover fairly soon. There's some great new movies playing at the Mill this weekend, including The Nest with Jude Law and Radioactive. With more, here's today's Movie Mill Minute.
Rory, an ambitious entrepreneur and former commodities broker, persuades his wife Allison and their children to leave the comforts of suburban America and return to his native England during the 1980s. Sensing opportunity, Rory rejoins his former firm and leases a centuries-old country manor. Soon, the promise of a lucrative new beginning starts to unravel, and the couple have to face the unwelcome truths lying beneath the surface of their marriage.
You're delusional because you have nothing, Rory. We have nothing. It's horrible here. No one is the same here. Nothing is the same
with
here.
This house. It's what we always wanted.
From the 1870s through to the 21st century, Radioactive tells the story of pioneering scientist Marie Curie. It tells about her extraordinary life and enduring legacies, the passionate partnerships, her shining scientific breakthroughs, and the darker consequences that followed.
I have been haunted my entire life trying to understand the impossible. This is my fight, and I will win it.
Some great movies playing at the Mill once again. It was another beautiful fall day in the Windy City. Now, if you're planning on heading to the mountains over the weekend, good news. The sunshine and warm temperatures will continue. Full weather details are coming up. It was a nice TGIF today, lots of sunshine and above seasonal values. Tonight, it should be mainly clear with a low near 2 degrees. Jeanette Rocher has a look at the extended forecast along with details of a pretty nice looking weekend shaping up.
It's going to be a beautiful weekend with lots of sunny skies. Saturday's high 22 and 23 expected for Sunday. That sunshine will continue into next week with Monday's high being 24, 26 the high for Tuesday, a mix of sun and cloud for Wednesday with a high of 20, and 19 will be the expected high for Thursday with a mix of sun and cloud. The almanac tells us that this time of year our average temperature should be a high of 17 degrees, our average low 3 degrees. 29 was our high temperature back in 1943 and our record low was -11. That was in 1999. Sun rose this morning at 7:33 a.m. and our sunset for Friday evening, 7:08 p.m. Looking across the rest of the country for Saturday's temperatures, should be mainly sunny and somewhat hazy on the west coast with highs of 18 for both Victoria and Vancouver. Lots of sunshine in Alberta. Edmonton's high 20, 21 expected in Calgary. Looking across the rest of the prairies, Saskatoon's high 15 degrees with a mix of sun and cloud. Mix of sun and cloud also expected in Regina with a high of 14 degrees. 10 will be the expected high in Winnipeg under mainly sunny skies. Over in Toronto, mix of sun and cloud expected there with a high of 14 degrees. 13 the high for Ottawa and 12 expected in Montreal with partly cloudy skies as well. Over in the Atlantic Canada and the Maritimes, Fredericton's high 14 degrees with a mix of sun and cloud. Mix of sun and cloud also expected in Charlottetown. They could expect a chance of showers, 30% chance there, 14 of the high. Halifax high 19 degrees with a mix of sun and cloud. St. John's, Newfoundland could see 5 to 10 millimeters of rain tomorrow with a high of 20 degrees.
Another Alberta oil company is having to lay off workers to deal with low oil prices and market volatility. Suncor told employees today that the company will be laying off close to 2,000 employees, which represents around 10 to 15% of its workforce. A company spokesperson says reductions will start with a 5% cut over the next 6 months. The Calgary-based company had 12,889 staff at the end of 2019. A 15% cut would equal 1,933 employees. Shareholders in Calgary-based Painted Pony have voted in favor of a friendly takeover by Canadian Natural Resources. Painted Pony says more than 86% of its shares were voted in favor of the deal, first announced in August. Canadian Natural, which is one of the largest gas producers in the country, will pay $111 million in cash and assume $350 million in debt. It said the takeover will allow it to grow its position in the liquids-rich Montney natural gas region in northeastern BC. Automaker Tesla says its third quarter sales rose 44% from a year ago as global demand for electric vehicles increased. The company says it delivered 139,000 SUVs and sedans from July through September, compared with 97,000 deliveries during the same period a year ago. The sales outpaced Wall Street expectations. Airbnb will not allow one-night rentals of entire houses over Halloween weekend as part of its ongoing effort to crack down on party houses. The ban applies to all short-term rentals in Canada and the U.S. for both October 30th and the 31st. Previously booked rentals will be cancelled and Airbnb will offer refunds. The company says it is also restricting longer reservations that could be used for Halloween parties. Amazon says close to 20,000 of its workers have tested positive or presumed positive for COVID-19. It says it examined data from March to September for its 1.37 million workers at both Amazon and Whole Foods Market. The company says the infection rate of its employees was well below that seen in the general U.S. population. The disclosure comes after months of pressure from Amazon workers and labor groups calling for the company to offer up coronavirus numbers. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 14 points today to 16,199. The Dow was down 134 points to 27,682. The S&P 500 was down 32 points to 3348, and the Nasdaq was down 251 points on the day to 11,075. West Texas Intermediate oil was down $1.66 to $37.06 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 8 cents to $2.45 US. Gold was down $7.12 to $18.98.89 US an ounce, and silver was down 7 cents to $23.72 US an ounce. Wheat is at $245 per metric ton, barley's at $237, canola's at $5.18, and corn is at $266 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 73 cents to $111.10, feeder cattle were down $1.38 to $139.88, and lean hogs were down 35 cents to $62.50. The Canadian dollar was down slightly on the day to 75.15 US.
Today's market numbers are brought to you by The Meat Box, your local butcher where quality matters.
Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Alberta Health Services says a technical glitch prevented 5,000 people who tested negative for COVID-19 from getting their results by phone, autodialer, or text. AHS says that represents less than 3% of the tests conducted in September. Officials say anyone with a positive result from September 3rd through the 29th was contacted by telephone. They say the problem has been fixed and delayed results are now being delivered. The novel coronavirus has created a lot of anxiety and depression in people. How can we manage those feelings in a healthy way? Dr. Greg Jans from the Centre A Place of Hope has some suggestions in an interview next. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. The Helen Schuler Nature Center is hosting a food forest workshop presented by Mandy Sandbatch of Soulfully Soil on October 3rd and 4th from 9:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Explore the world of food forestry and permaculture and discover how to create abundant perennial food systems right at home. Each day will include an outdoor tour. This workshop is open to those ages 16 and up. Cost is $180 and masks will be required inside the building. To register, call 403-320-3064. Lethbridge's Sport Council's Outdoor Roving Gyms program is taking place Mondays and Wednesdays from 9:30 to 11:30 a.m. behind Nicholas Sharon Arena. This program is for kids ages 5 and under and their caregivers. Come and enjoy an hour of fun and get active. For details and to register, visit lethbridgesportcouncil.ca/rovinggyms. Get to know your city and take part in the Lethbridge Scavenger Hunt. Download the Let's Roam Scavenger Hunt app Lace up your walking shoes and head out with family to discover the best landmarks in Lethbridge. Put your navigation skills to the test while enjoying the journey at your own pace. No reservations, no tour guides, and fun for all ages. Visit letsroam.com/scavenger hunt. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
Worrying about the smallest details and attempting to control situations can sometimes overwhelm us, causing serious anxiety issues. Dr. Gregory Jans is the founder of the Center of Place of Hope, which is one of the top facilities for treatment of depression and anxiety in the United States. He's the author of the book, 7 Answers for Anxiety. Welcome back to Bridge City News, Dr. Jans.
Good to be with you, and boy, what a time for anxiety.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, with COVID-19 going on right now, you say that anxiety is defined as a painful or apprehensive uneasiness. Where do you think that really originates from, and why is it so much worse for some people?
Because we've had trauma in our life, and this period we're in, and you said COVID-19, this is a period of chronic anxiety. It's kind of like a pandemic purgatory. You know what I'm saying? It's like, we're kind of miserable where we are. We don't want to go back to March, and we look ahead to the future, and we're really wondering, wow, how's it going to be? And that's anxiety. Anxiety means how it has hit us physically. It's affecting our sleep. We feel anxiety or we feel fear kind of throughout our whole body.
So, Dr. Jans, how have anxiety and depression cases increased since the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, one of the things we know is the World Health Organization tells us right now, anxiety is the #1 worldwide, it's called a disorder. So it's above heart disease, it's above cancer, it's above depression. Anxiety, so we think about, we have a pandemic, but we have an epidemic in the pandemic, and that's anxiety.
So what's the big difference then, in your opinion, between anxiety and a phobia?
Well, a phobia could be a specific fear. Sometimes we hear the term agoraphobia, which technically means the fear of open places. But here's what we know. Agoraphobia, the fear of going out, has increased. As we've quarantined, as we've confined, as we've isolated, we've also created a fear of going out. I mean, think about the social anxiety right now. People don't know, do I look at you? When do I wear my mask? And everything is socially awkward. I was just with a gentleman today, and he reached over and gave me a big hug. By the way, it was fine with me, but it's like he goes, "Oh no, I shouldn't have done that. I'm so sorry." People don't know what to do, what's okay. That's social anxiety.
How about some of the anxiety and depression our seniors are feeling right now, being isolated from a lot of their family members?
Yes, there's the isolation, and virtual relationships can only go so far. And I'm glad we have those. I'm glad I can see you today and share. But we also know that we need real relationship and actual real life relationships as well. And we know that when that's cut off and cut off abruptly, we find ways to replace that. Unfortunately, among all ages, addictions are up, whether it's a digital addiction, cyber addiction, could be alcohol, and depending on where you live, alcohol sales have really skyrocketed, rotted too, but it's like 500 to 600% more alcohol sales right now.
Why do people with deep anxiety try to control their surroundings?
Any way that I can have control, it makes me feel like, some relief. You see, anxiety is all about gaining some sense of control. This is why when we first had the beginning stages of this pandemic, there was a toilet paper craze. Everybody went out and they bought in herds, bought toilet paper. You don't hear any of that now, but really that was driven because of fear. And fear, we do drastic things and we tend to run in groups. If one person's doing it, go, I have to do something because it gives me that sense of control.
Dr. Jans, what are some of the hidden assumptions people with anxiety actually believe?
Well, they do believe, and by the way, anxiety or fear always distorts reality. It makes us hypersensitive. At times, it causes us to see things that are not there. It can cause us to be critical. We can be very judgmental because of that anxiety and fear. So one of the things you need to know is anxiety distorts reality.
So what's the big difference then between a person's objective or subjective reality in terms of managing that anxiety?
Well, it doesn't matter if it's all our perception. So anxiety is going to be anxiety, whether it's a real concern or not. And by the way, we're not to be faulted for that. That's just how it works. And you can train your body to constantly feel anxious. We're in a hyper-vigilant state right now. Chronic stress, chronic anxiety, and it's like the state of anxiety we're in has put us in a perpetual state of uncertainty, and we need to understand that's going to have a physical effect. We also know that if we isolate in our relationships with others too much, anxiety will go up. We also know that it can put us in the middle of a real spiritual desert. We can disconnect spiritually.
You know, we talked about, like you said before, using video conferencing, Skype or Zoom to be able to reach out to loved ones, but nothing will really replace giving somebody a hug, a loving embrace, and that one-on-one human interaction and connection. Do you think because we're lacking a lot of that, that's also heightening a lot of the anxiety levels?
Absolutely. You see, comfort comes in touch. Two ways we receive comfort: good, positive words that are comforting, and we also receive it through touch. Boy, there's a power in a hug. We know that touch alters body chemistry. That's right. It releases even endorphins, and chemistry in our body changes when we are hugged, when we're touched. And so we've got to have, humans, by the way, really do need touch. So some of that's been lacking.
Now, you said in the past that fear of the past drains the promise of the future. Can you explain that in more detail?
Sure, we may be traumatized by not only what's going on, but it could be a trigger from the past. Maybe you've struggled with some depression and anxiety. Maybe there's been some real trauma in the past. So now we're in the middle of a pandemic and it's a re-trigger. And so that past kind of gets moved forward. And that moving forward of the past amplifies our present anxiety.
Now, your book seems to suggest that we try to rewire the way we view life by eliminating negative messages. How can we really do this?
Yes, we've got to keep plugging the truth in. And by the way, it's baby steps every day. I do something the old-fashioned way. I pull, a 3x5 card. Do you remember those? I have one right here. 3x5 card. I'm going to write a verse. I'm going to write some truth. I'm going to carry this in my pocket, and I'm going to recite that verse or that positive affirmation or truth. My brain needs a way to renew. Otherwise, we keep recycling the negative. I call it ants, automatic negative thoughts.
So how do anxieties maybe create a little bit of a life on overload?
Yeah, it keeps us in overload. So remember, anxiousness, and by the way, it's okay. We're human beings. We may have some worry. We may have some anxiety. It's just how long do we dwell in that? Because it will have implications in our relationships, in our physical well-being. A habitual state of anxiety that's chronic over time lowers our immunity. We are going to see people because of anxiety that will have physical concerns. This will happen.
So Dr. Jans, do perfectionists tend to be more prone to anxiety? And if so, why?
Yes, perfectionist. Well, we all know one. And a perfectionist may be a person, it's all got to be just right, just right, just right. And it's never just right. Okay? That's a perfectionist. We like to do an excellent job, but that's different than perfectionism. So perfectionism can step over and be more obsessive compulsive. Obsessive compulsive means I am consumed by my thoughts and my behaviors. And this is a time right now, if you've struggled with, germs and things being clean, right now could be a real struggle. That obsessive thought, we can never get things clean enough. I'm never safe enough. And that's that obsessive compulsiveness that can come out of perfectionism.
Now, there are times in life when anxiety is a normal, healthy response to various circumstances. How can we really tell if we're overreacting?
If you stay in it over time, an initial anxiety when we receive maybe unfavorable or unpleasant news and we're in a state of kind of a shock, we're shocked by it. And we have a period of recovery after that, of just kind of bringing back our senses and resetting. But if you don't ever reset emotionally, you will find yourself really in an unhealthy state of anxiety. Now, what do humans try to do? We try to self-medicate. I can't handle this anxiety anymore. That's where they drink. That's where they overeat. That's where we do diversion behaviors that at times are self-destructive.
The Bible tells us not to be anxious about anything. Now, that's pretty difficult at the best of times. Is anxiety a sin?
I don't put anxiety as a sin, but I think what we can do with anxiety could end up being sinful. If I end up being engaged in self-destructive behaviors and develop secret addictions, and I start lying and living a double life, I'm really setting myself up for some problems. And so I think it can lead us down the wrong path. But you know what? We're human beings, and we're going to have these experiences. But how long? I mean, right now, pandemic, this is a chance to reset or regret. You'll regret by doing certain things or not doing certain things.
So where does one's personal life fit into the discussion of anxiety?
Well, I think it's an opportunity for us to go, you know, where's my fears in my life? Maybe take 15 minutes, take a notepad, write down what's my top 10 fears. What are the top 10 things that just keep recycling in my mind that I'm dwelling upon? Some of those fears are things that may be totally out of our control, and I'm learning a new way of walking in faith. And maybe I need to match up God's word or a verse to each of those fears and begin to renew my mind because we've got to reset the truth.
Now, you include a very important chapter about the importance of making healthy choices. What does that really look like in practical terms, outside of maybe a few less donuts?
Yeah, well, I think a practical choice goes, how well am I caring for myself? Self-care. That may include things as sleep. If you're anxious, sleep could be disruptive. But here's the other thing. I just talked to somebody the other day, and I think he said he was up to about 12 cups of coffee a day.
Wow.
Well, 12 cups of coffee. He goes, I'm drinking it to soothe me. No, it's not soothing you. It's creating more anxiety. Replace that. Here we go. Have some water. Okay? Drink your water. Those are simple things. But when we're anxious, we tend not to do the simple things.
How about focusing in on God's word and meditating on his love and spending more time in his presence? That'll also calm the nerves a little bit and maybe some of the anxiety issues as well.
Absolutely. And that's why we need, maybe it's that 3x5 card again, and you're writing down a verse, and you're going to go out for that 20-minute walk and say that verse out loud and watch what happens. There's a way that God uses scriptures that come alive to us. There is a renewal that can happen. Keep practicing it.
So, Dr. Jans, any final advice for those people who are feeling overwhelmed by anxiety?
Try not to do it alone. By the way, we tend to isolate under anxiety. It may be a time to have 2, maybe 3 individuals that you can really tell the truth, where you're praying together. If you've reached a point where it's so significant you feel some despair, that's really the time, though, to ask for help. That's the time to go, okay, I can't stay here. It's not a good place to be. My thoughts are getting more irrational. So there is a season, there is a time where I need to ask for help.
You know, there's one good thing about not a lot of sports taking place right now, actually being there to watch your team. You're a little less anxious, especially when they lose, right? So maybe that's one good thing about COVID. I don't know. Dr. Gregory Jans, author of the book, 7 Answers for Anxiety. Thanks for joining me today from Washington State.
Yeah, good to be with you.
Climate change continues to be a hot topic of debate. Now, what are some of the causes of climate change? Are the changes to climate cyclical? Gregory Wrightstone likes to discuss climate change. He's a geologist and author of the bestseller Inconvenient Facts, and he joins me from Pennsylvania. Greg, welcome back to BCN.
Oh, great to be back on with you again. It's we're right in the heart of the climate change alarm season now in the summer with hurricanes and fire. So,
yeah, we've seen some of those wildfires in Southern California, Central California again. But at the same time, in Europe, there are record low temperatures in Sweden and Norway. They're actually having frost in July. Now, some people say, well, that's not called global warming anymore. That's why we call it climate change.
Yeah, if they were record highs, it would be the front page of the New York Times or any of the big papers that would be running on the news every night. When we see record lows, we hear crickets because they conflate these high temperatures and any catastrophic event that happens to climate change. And that's what they do. They want to instill this climate of fear, and that's really their object.
Let's talk about your passion discussing climate change then, Greg. Why is this so important to debate this?
Yeah, I got into this. I spent my career as a geologist searching various aspects of the Earth's geologic history. But when I started getting into this, it was really a search for the truth. It was my own search for the truth about climate change. And as I got into it, I went back to the base data and looked at the actual data from NASA, NOAA, peer-reviewed studies, UN reports. And what I found was frankly shocking. I found that what we were being told by the UN, by the mainstream media and the like, it just ran almost entirely opposite of what I found the science, the facts, and the data tell us. For example, one thing I always use, everybody thinks forest fires in California are increasing. They're not. The forest fires in California this is just one example, over the last 30 years, have declined by almost 50% over the last 30 years. They declined. You wouldn't know that. Nobody knows that. Now, the area burned has increased, but that's a forest management issue. And we can go on. There was another, this what I call the UN extinction host, where the UN came out with a report 2 months ago that there'd be 1 million extinctions over the next several decades. That would require 20,000 to 25,000 species to go extinct every year. Well, I went back and looked at the exact same data. You know what it's been for the last 30 years? I'm not going to make you guess. Two per year. They're saying there'll be 20,000. There's 2 per year. And that's from the IUCN Red List. That's what the science tells us. And what they're doing is they're trying to instill a climate of fear, and we need an alarmed population to pass otherwise onerous and painful regulations like the Paris Climate Accord. Here in the United States, we have our Green New Deal, $90 to $100 trillion for us here in the United States over 10 years. You're experiencing that in Canada right now with a push for wind and solar that's driving up here.
Well, in single-use plastics too, we've chatted a bit about that too, with Ottawa wanting to implement that, but that's taken a seat, that's on the back burner right now with COVID-19. What about some of these climate change scientists that you butted heads with? They're saying, Greg, you're a geologist, leave the climate science to us.
Yeah, well, I've been recently accepted as an expert reviewer for the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. That's they issue every year a 5-year report. We're in the 6th assessment report. I'm accepted as an expert reviewer in that. I'm a geologist. I'm not a climate science guy, but there's probably 40 different disciplines that are involved in climate change, and this is one of them. And it's a big, big important thing because as a geologist, I look at the big picture. I look at not decades of temperature, a couple hundred years, but I look at centuries, thousands of years, and millions of years of data to show that what we're experiencing now, we're in a 300 plus year warming trend. There's no doubt. We are. That's just a fact. We're in this warming trend, but it looks very similar to many other warming trends in the past that were warmer than what we are today. The last one was called the medieval warm period. And these other warm periods that we saw, this is what's fascinating. I'm working on my new book now, and I'm taking a deep dive into the relationship between the rise and fall of temperature and the rise and fall of humanity and civilization. And there's just a strong correlation during each of the previous warm periods. Again, warmer than we are today. Great civilizations rose up. People prospered. Food was bountiful. No one went hungry. It was the cold periods that were horrific. Mass depopulation, starvation, famine. And I don't know if we have time, there's just a great story relating climate change and the witch hunts of the late Middle Ages. 30 to 40,000 witches were burned at the stake and killed during the cold of what's called the Little Ice Age. As it started getting cold, crops failed, famine set in, and they blamed it on weather causing witches. And I've got a chart that's going to be in my book showing the number of witches killed per decade versus temperature, and there's this great correlation. And it's fascinating when people hear that, they go, huh. So I always say, fear the cold. But we're being told, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, it can't get more than 1.5 degrees centigrade colder than or warmer than it is today, or we're all going to die. No, we're not. History tells us just the opposite.
Greg, let's talk about the big bucks involved in climate change. It's made Al Gore a multimillionaire. Last report says he's worth over $330 million.
Now, I'm surprised it's not higher than that. I am shocked that it's only $330 million. I don't get angry at Al Gore so much because he's not a scientist. He's used something to make money. It's the scientists that really make me angry that are using this to their own benefit, and frankly, in a lot of cases, lying to us.
Now, in a blog you wrote in May of this year, you mentioned that the Earth has recorded its 600 millionth consecutive cooler than average month. This may go against that popular doctrine of, like we discussed earlier, the global warming.
Oh, absolutely. What they're doing, they being the climate alarmists, are looking at, we're warmer today than it's been in hundreds of years. Well, that's true. Because again, we're in a warming trend. Each decade should get a little bit warmer. But I look at the big picture, again, as a geologist, we're really in some of the coldest period of Earth's history. We're in these glacial periods. We happen to be in a warm, what's called an interglacial cycle between the glacial advances. And the next advance of glaciers is going to be horrific, and it will affect you in Canada the worst. When it comes, we know what happened the last time. Virtually all of Canada was under hundreds and thousands of feet of ice. And it's going to be bad. It's going to be really, really, really bad. Again, fear the cold. And it doesn't have to be an advance of the ice sheet, but just another cold period like the Little Ice Age I talked about with the witch hunts. During that period, it's estimated that 50% of the population of Iceland perished, a third of the entire population of the Earth perished. And if we look also, it's, again, I say this a lot, it's just opposite of what we're being told. We're being told that people are going to die when it gets warm. If we look at excessive deaths, at deaths related to temperature, we find that 15 to 20 times as many people die related to related to cold as to heat. So 15 to 20 times as many people die cold-related deaths as they do heat-related deaths. So it only the common sense person would listen to that, see the data, and say, well, global warming will save lives. When these climate enthusiasts hear me saying that, their heads explode. But it's a fact. It's just a fact.
How far back really should scientists go when comparing temperatures?
We have to go, I think, at least 10,000 years, or even 2,000 years back to what I call the medieval warm period, to find that was warmer than it is today. It's just the common sense person knows that in the Roman warm period, the previous one, the Romans were growing citrus in the north of England. During the medieval warm period, the Vikings in Greenland, there are still Vikings buried deeply in permafrost. And the other common sense thing people really understand, our glaciers are retreating right now. And they have been since the early 1800s. As they're retreating, they're exposing archaeological information on farms and villages. They're exposing mature forests that are not. Well, think about that. As this glacier is now retreating, We're seeing mature trees being exposed. It had to have been a lot warmer at that time. It's just common sense things like that that people get. And we can do it for many different things. But if you just look at the last 300 years, yeah, it's been warmer. But I'm a huge proponent of the many benefits of modest warming and increasing CO2. And my philosophy is that we should use all of Earth's resources for the betterment of mankind and do it as good stewards. And that's a great philosophy.
So when it comes to climate change then, Greg, what part of it is really played by carbon dioxide?
Well, carbon dioxide is increasing. The increase in carbon dioxide is due mainly to our burning of fossil fuels, about 6% due to cement manufacture that people don't know. But it's due to us. We've increased, let's just say 130 parts per million to a little over 400. That increase is due to us. It's a greenhouse gas. It provides some warming, greenhouse warming to the atmosphere. I just believe it's very modest and overwhelmed by those same natural forces that have been driving temperature since the late 1600s. And we see, well, the first half of the 20th century had virtually no carbon dioxide driven warming, but yet it warmed at about the same rate as what we have in the post-World War II when we started adding a lot of CO2. Those same natural forces that have been in action since the dawn of time didn't stop in the middle or start in the middle of the 20th or stop in the middle of the 20th century. They're in action today just as they have been, again, since the dawn of time. And it's just common sense. People need to understand that as a geologist, we look at what happened in the past. We say those processes are acting today as they did in the past.
There are actually concerns that glaciers are disappearing from the Canadian Arctic landscape. Your thoughts on that?
I haven't seen specifics about that. There are Canadian glaciers all over the world, again, are in retreat, but the retreat is not accelerating because of CO2. If you look at the glacial retreat, I've got a chart in my book of 169 glaciers all over the Northern Hemisphere, showing that rate's about the same as it was in the mid-1800s, where there was no CO2 driven. And if we look, Dr. Timothy Ball has a study I just looked at in terms of tree line in Canada. The tree line has moved northward 100 kilometers, according to Dr. Ball, over the last 100 years. We can just trace that northward. So it's happening. Yes, welcome it, embrace it. Back before climate science became politicized, those warm periods were called climate optima. They were called climate optima for a reason, because both the Earth's ecosystems and humanity prospered by the warming. Again, food was bountiful, food was plentiful, and it was the intervening cold that was horrific.
Now, in another blog you posted earlier this year, you mentioned a study which ran from 2000 to 2018, which concluded that the United States was already in a mega drought, one of the worst in about 1,200 years. The study was based on tree ring data. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, well, tree ring data is famously, notoriously horrible for a prediction of temperature. But in this particular study, I went and looked at, they predicted this drought, continuing mega drought that we were in the Southwest United States. Well, I went back and looked at the data. Right after their study was published in 2019, we had the lowest drought in the United States that they had ever recorded since they started recording it. So this mega drought, and they knew it. This data was available before they published that, yet they claimed that this mega drought was ongoing into 2019 and 2020. Yet we see the fewest acres in the United States in drought, and zero in the area they said where this mega drought was occurring. They can't. Again, it's a climate of fear. We need a frightened population, and we've got that. That these kids in our schools today are being taught that they're to blame, their parents are to blame, and we're all going to, mommy, daddy, what am I ever going to do? I don't know. People aren't having children because of this. And again, we're being silenced. People like me, I've had personal experience with that. with being silenced. I'm doing it right now. My local environmental advisory committee in my township I live in, it actually made a rule change to prevent me from getting on the committee. They were going to, yeah, and we're in the process right now. So they made that rule change to 40 years of charter of the township charter. They didn't want me, a science denier, and a radical pro-environment energy guy, to be on the committee. If I was a 28-year-old with a man bun, and I thought the Earth was going to end in 12 years, man, they'd have me on that committee tomorrow. They couldn't get me on their committee fast enough. So what did I do? I immediately launched a Right to Know Freedom of Information Act request to the committee. And we're going to find out what they had to say. It'll be interesting to see the emails going back and forth between each of them, talking about, oh, this is a science denier. We can't allow him on the committee. And he wants to do fracking and provide energy. We can't have that. So, that's just happening right now.
Gregory Wrightstone, geologist and author of the bestseller Inconvenient Facts. Thanks a lot for joining us today from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Hal.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.